Aziz dosto, assalamu alaikum, namaste, sat sri akal, good afternoon. Today I'm very pleased to have with me David again. David, the most vocal person in England, and that he texts up. People sometimes don't like it, but when we go in details, we understand that how correct he is. David, welcome to my show, Arif ki Bhasha.
Hi, Arif. It's really nice to be back with you. It's always an absolute pleasure to speak to you and also to those people who watch you. So nice to be here.
Living in England and living as a Muslim in England, I have so many things to ask you. I'll start with the expulsion of you and Katie Hopkins from Twitter. How do you see it, and what were the reasons?
Well, in the case of Katie was expelled because she made a joke. And unfortunately, you're not allowed to make jokes on Twitter. And that was used as evidence to take her down. In my case, I was expelled from Twitter because I asked a question, a perfectly reasonable question of a public figure who'd made a statement. And that was seized upon by the left-wing hordes, the witch hunts that operate across Twitter, Arif. And I was called all kinds of names. I was called a racist. I was called all kinds of stuff like that, which is pathetic and defamatory. But that's how the left operates. And actually, Twitter, as usual, as could be predicted, once all the big blue tick names, of which pretty much all of the left-wing blue tick names in the UK demanded that I be taken down, and so it was. I was taken down. So that's essentially the short history of it. But you know, it was always going to happen. It was going to happen because, and this is something I know that you've always spoken the truth. I know that people watching this, that's what we exist for, to speak truth. And as you said in your introduction, sometimes truth can be harsh. It can be hard to hear, Arif. No one, I don't want to hear the truth either, but you got to say it. So I'm not unhappy to be removed from a platform which essentially hates the truth, and it hates our truth, the things we talk about. I've had so much abuse in the past week. It's kind of cosmic, the levels of hatred. And but you know something, it's like everything else. The people behind it don't seem to realize that it doesn't weaken us. It doesn't weaken Katie. It doesn't weaken me. It makes us stronger. And that's something they will come to learn in due course.
David, where is freedom of expression? Where is freedom of speech? This country has always stood, United States, where Twitter operates, they always stood for freedom of speech. And we saw on Twitter and Facebook that there is so much of hate speech that is not stopped. Then why these genuine voices are silenced? Where is the freedom of expression then?
I think freedom of expression here in the UK, Arif, is disappearing really fast. Sadly, for me, one of the difficulties I had was that if you go on BBC or Sky or any of the big media channels, you're not allowed to say certain things. So they censor you. So then you go to social media like Twitter and you try to then have honest conversations, and then you get censored. And the government doesn't move in to support. The government does nothing. In fact, I think the government's happy about the idea of censorship. And so for me, and it's interesting, talking to you about this, as someone who's come from outside of the UK here, expecting to have more freedoms. Unfortunately, the way this country's going, we will have as few freedoms as, for example, many people, dissenting people in Pakistan will have. That's the direction UK is heading. And so I try to warn about it. I try to speak up. I've got lots of friends, lots of people who agree, Arif, and understand that freedom of speech is deeply under threat. And we will continue to fight the fight, and we won't be given up.
But tell me, how can we continue to fight when we are not on such platforms? Because these are Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter are such major platforms. How can we stop this? I call it fascism. Sorry to say, but this is fascism, that when you suppress truth, when you suppress the people who are ready to speak truth. So how do you advise us to continue, people who are still on Twitter and because Parler, I have also joined behind you, but that's not still the platform that
Yeah.
at the extent of Twitter and this. So how can we continue this fight?
Well, that's a great question. And there's several answers to that. In the first place, you're absolutely right. Parler, where you can find me at David Vance, if you're, hopefully people will go and find me there. It's a smaller platform. I think it's got about 4 million people on it. Twitter's got 2.2 billion people. So that's the difference. But a lot of that 2.2 billion, I believe they're bots. You know, they're Chinese bots. There's lots of falseness around Twitter, and I think, you know, Arif, people, if you're still on Twitter and others are, you should continue to fight. I fought as long as I could over there until they took me down. I believe they will eventually come for everybody who does speak for truth. And yes, it's been Katie and then it's been me, but it'll be somebody else tomorrow. So that's why we've got to use other weapons. And by that I mean we do need to go to Parler. If we can be on YouTube, like you are, we need to use YouTube. And can I ask, please, it would be really nice, Arif, if we could get as many of your YouTube followers to please consider my YouTube channel, which is David Vance 2020. Please consider that, because we'll use that as well as another platform. But there will be new platforms coming along. It won't all just be Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. There will be newer things coming along. There'll be things that maybe bypass social media. You know, there are other things actively underway that I can sort of let people know that our voices are not going to be shut up, because there's no point in being on Twitter or Facebook or even YouTube if you can't say the things that concern you. Well, what is the point? And so I believe these platforms will die eventually. I mean, people, some time ago, there was a platform called MySpace, which was quite big. It's gone now. And that's what happens. Twitter is woke. It's hard left. It's full of the most awful accounts, Arif. This is a platform, Twitter, that allows pedophiles, pornography. This is a revolting platform, but it doesn't take those sort of things down. It takes the likes of me and Katie down. So, you've got to ask yourself, there will come a point when none of us will be left on Twitter, and that maybe that's a good thing. Let it rot, let it die. And I know it will get big. It's a big platform, but Twitter was made by people like Katie Hopkins, who had million plus people following her. It was her content that brought people to Twitter, not Twitter. And that applies right now. The creators, the people who make the content, that express the opinions, that want to have the discussions, we are the people, I believe, that people hopefully will be interested in. And whether that's on Parler or whether it's on Gab or whether it's wherever it is, there's different platforms. And as I say, there will be new ones. That's hopefully where people will come.
I have many questions as a Muslim living in England to you about England, because Brexit, mask, pandemic, all this. But first I will go to USA, because there are elections, and these elections of United States have impact on entire globe. So how do you see these elections? Because the polls are showing that President Trump is lagging to Biden. So how do you see these elections, and what are the role of these platforms, Twitter and Facebook, that they are playing?
Yeah, another really good question. Excuse me. Back in 2016, the polls showed that Trump was going to lose 92%. I think it was 92%. The polls had him a guaranteed loser, and he won. And he won. And here's the important point, because Twitter and Facebook are not, they're not reality. They are just representative of a particular point of view. Back in 2016, I remember going on the media, TV, and predicting that I thought that Donald Trump would win. And I was laughed at and mocked, and then he won. So this year, I believe President Trump will win re-election. I think the Democrats have the most pathetic candidate imaginable in the form of Joe Biden. But I think the media is going through the same circus again, Arif. So they're suggesting, oh, look, the polls have got Trump behind, and they're running all the hit stories on him. And it's 2016 all over again. Twitter and Facebook, though, have changed. Back in 2016, they didn't realize the power that they had, I think. They realized that shortly afterwards. And in 2018, certainly Twitter and Facebook have become much more militant. And like, one of the reasons I don't feel too bad is, I mean, okay, Twitter have taken me down, but they've also hidden some of President Trump's tweets. So this is the elected president of the United States, and Twitter won't let him put out certain things on Twitter, which is why I hope when he wins in November, I think one of the things he needs to do, Arif, is he needs to get to grips with these big social media giants. And, you know, because they're not platforms, because they editorialize against me, people like me, people perhaps like you, people like Katie, they go against us. That means they are essentially publishers. Well, if they're publishers, then they carry full legal culpability for all the censoring that they do. So I hope President Trump in 2021 will really take these guys on. And if they're not going to treat us fairly, that's their choice. But they have to pay a price, Arif. So far, they've not been made to pay a price. President Trump's our best hope. And that's why I want him to be re-elected. It's crucial for the world. It's crucial for the UK. It's crucial, I believe, for countries like India. I think there's a big importance there. And it's just fundamental for, I think, the future of our sort of civilizations that Trump gets back. If Biden gets in, everyone's going to suffer.
Tell me one thing. As a student, I would like to learn something. That last week I received letter from Labour Party that your membership is about to expire and you have to renew it. And I decided not to renew it. I myself was always thinking myself as a left supporter of left politics. And when watching you also, I'm surprised that you talk like a leftist, because our politics are for the common people, and that's what left was. But what is this left that is a more fascist and this? So how do you describe left of today? Because this is not the left which historically left had the voice.
It's so true. It's such a good point that leftism is unrecognizable from what it once upon a time was. I mean, once upon a time, actually, leftism embraced debate. Now, leftism wants to shut you down. It wants to cancel you. I remember, I'm old enough to remember, Arif, there was a time when it was leftists who were the people who spoke up for free speech. Now, leftists want to close down free speech. Leftists also wanted to support the working man and woman and support the family. They used to want to do that, as opposed to, let's say, the more the right-wing people who were much more looking after vested interests. But that switched over as well. And in the UK, the voter base for the Labour Party is essentially metropolitan elitists who aren't recognisably socialist, who certainly are not on the side of the working man at all. I mean, look at the Labour Party. It's led by Sir Keir Starmer. I mean, what do you make of that? So Labour's betrayed the working man and woman, and that's one of the big things that I think it's so obvious in the UK. That's why they can't get elected, because working men and women are, if you know this, the average working man and woman is smart. They understand things. But they've been taken for fools for too long. And that's why I'm really glad that you, and I know many others as well in the UK, who would have perhaps over many years have thought we've got to support Labour. You're not renewing your membership. You're walking away. And I think that's good. Labour took people like you for granted. That's the thing. And you've done the right thing by making it clear that you won't be taken for granted. And I think millions like you, by the way. They've lost millions of voters.
And I posted it on Twitter that I'm not renewing. I received this letter and I'm not renewing because I'm disappointed with Labour and the left politics. Yeah. David, as you said that you have a YouTube channel, and I would request you, because we want to keep your voice, Katie's voice, and these voices alive. So I would request you that please send me, each time there is a video on your channel, send me the link on WhatsApp so that we can promote it on Twitter and Facebook from our platforms. So that way your voice can be heard.
Well, that's very kind of you, and thank you very much, Arif, for that. Because I think one of the things that I feel is important in terms of debate is that Twitter restricts you to 260 characters. At the very best, it's just very short sentences. The thing that we're doing right now, this is a conversation between two people. The people watching this will follow this as human beings talking and engaging with each other. For me, this is better. It's more rounded, it's more three-dimensional than Twitter or indeed Facebook for that matter. So I do like this medium anyway. And so I hope to be able to cover lots of the topics that I covered on Twitter, but in more detail with special guests and all kinds of people. And hopefully, YouTube will allow that. And, that can continue the debate. But for sure, we do need to talk about the issues and in a sensible manner. I've always tried to do that, Arif. I don't move to... Sometimes I know I say things that some people might think are harsh, but everything I've tried to say is fact-based, based on data. That's how I operate, and it will be the same here on YouTube as well.
Again, going back to USA, George Floyd, Black Lives Matter. What was that? Tell me that. Was it hijacked, or was it a correct movement and hijacked, or it was never a correct movement? Because there are some isolated cases of black subjugation in United States, not in UK. In UK, I don't find that is because I live in Europe since 30 years, and yeah. I've never faced racism, not at all. In Belgium, in France, in Holland, and now in England, I'm living since 9 years almost, and I've never faced racism. So what was that Black Lives Matter, the beginning, and then was it hijacked?
Yeah, I think it was. I think what happened is, and you're right, Arif, in the United States, there has been a problem in certain areas between the police and members of the black community, and that's to be deeply regretted. But I think it's not a huge issue, but it's an emotional issue. And what happened here was, and we all know the circumstances, or at least as the media portrayed them, regarding the death of George Floyd. But of course, the media didn't really tell us that George Floyd himself was high on fentanyl, which is an extremely strong illegal narcotic at the time of his death, and he did have cardiac problems. So it's not just as simple as the cop basically murdered him, because I don't believe the cop did murder him. However, to your point, the Black Lives Matter movement, which had been in place for at least 3 or 4 years, they seized on it. They absolutely seized on it. The media went with it because it then enabled all the violence to erupt in Seattle, in Portland, and other Democrat cities. And so you get all these images in TV of America's on fire, just at the time as President Trump is going for re-election. Now, I'm afraid I don't think that's coincidence. I think the death of George Floyd was weaponized by the Marxists in Black Lives Matter, exploited by the Democrats, And we'll see how it pans out. But I do think that, I mean, one of the ironies is, Arif, that all these riots are happening in Democrat cities. Well, they weren't going to vote for Trump anyway. It wasn't happening. Portland was never going to vote for President or Donald Trump. So they're burning their own cities down. I'll tell you the people I feel sorry for. The ordinary working black men and women in these communities. Those who humble hop shopkeepers who have seen their businesses burnt down, who have seen years of effort reduced to rubble and ashes by gangs, which I'm sure you may have noticed, which is quite ironic. A lot of the gangs that are going around causing the trouble, they're not black people. They're white people. They're white, middle class, privileged Americans, and they Antifa, which to my mind are, you mentioned the word fascist earlier. I consider Antifa to be fascists. And so these white middle class wokey kids are destroying black neighborhoods, and that's wrong. So my sympathies lie with the family of George Floyd. I wouldn't want to, it's an awful way to lose your father or your brother, or it's a terrible thing. My sympathies lie with his family, with those black businesses that have been ruined, and my contempt lies with Antifa, with the Democrats, and most of all with the Marxist, anti-family, Black Lives Matter movement itself, which is very close to being a domestic terrorist organization, as far as I can see.
David, cricket is my passion. And last year when England had the World Cup, Indian captain, wicket-keeper, Mahendra Singh Dhoni, he had gloves with a small trademark of Indian Army, because Dhoni is an active army person also.
Yeah.
So he put it, and ICC had a storm, and they said that cricket has no place for politics and this and that. And then this year we see that when West Indies come and this knee down and Black Lives Matter, then such a huge political involvement is allowed, but a small trademark was not allowed. Why this double standard? Why sports is being politicized?
Well, I agree with you. Sports has been totally politicized, and we've seen it with cricket in the UK. We've seen it in football, the Premier League in the UK. We've seen it in the States as well. And I'll tell you why it is. It's because all these big corporations are scared senseless of Black Lives Matter. They don't want to be seen to be racist. So unless they bow down, and you've seen, as you say, Arif, you've seen them bowing down. You've seen them with, with Black Lives Matter's insignia. I mean, this is a Marxist organization. I disagree with all of this. I think sport and politics should be kept as separate as is possible. If that's possible, do that. But what we've seen has been horrific. And I think a lot of cricket fans and a lot of football fans as well. I mean, the football is an interesting one, because I think that because the football stadiums are empty, because they're not allowing crowds in, they get away with all this virtue signalling. If you had a football stadium or a cricket stadium full of maybe 20, 30, 40,000 people, I think you might find quite a few of those people wouldn't be too impressed with taking the knee or bowing to Black Lives Matters, So yes, it's the hypocrisy of like the ICC, of the Premier League, of the NFL, of all these organizations. But it's because they're scared. All their advisors are telling them that this is the right thing to do. It's not. It's the wrong thing to do. And I think when history looks back, they'll be seen to be a bunch of spineless cowards. They should have stuck by impartiality. It's perfectly, if people want to support Black Lives Matter, it's fine, but not sporting bodies. That's wrong. And at least in my mind, that's wrong anyway.
Have you been to Oxford Street during those days when there were so many scumbags coming out? I know England is a multicultural society. Yeah. And it's a good thing, but then is it diversity that when I go to a park and I see a paper that don't bring your dogs here because we Muslims don't like it? I'm a Muslim, but I don't believe in all these things. And when we see this on Oxford Street in London,
yeah,
horrible. How can you stop it? Because I don't like it as a Muslim. Because if they want this kind of things, then go to Saudi Arabia, then go to Pakistan. As Katie said, that if Islam is such a wonderful religion, why do you go to a Christian country to live in? Because when we are in Pakistan, we don't like the Sharia law there, so we come to Europe. And then we want to bring Sharia law here. So why this appeasement by British governments, persistent appeasement is going on? How to stop it?
Well, what we need to do is we need to have better people in government. That's what we need to do. The appeasement has been relentless. And this government, this new Boris Johnson government, is every bit as bad as the ones that went before. And you're right. People should be able to come to this country, Arif, be they Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, it doesn't matter. People's religion is for them. It's in my mind, it's a private matter for them. But they should all be made to be held responsible to the British laws, to British traditions and British culture. That's how it should be. Our governments are too cowardly to do this. We've got weak fools in power, I'm afraid. And I mean, the biggest irony was, yeah, you mentioned Oxford Street. Yesterday, this was the biggest irony of all, when the government was telling us that we can't have more than 6 people get together, Arif, because, that's just not possible. We had a parade down Oxford Street, which looked pretty much Islamists or some form of Islamists making a parade down the street. And there were thousands of them. And that's hypocrisy. We want good, responsible citizens in this country. Doesn't matter what religion they are, or if they have no religion, doesn't matter. But you've got to be held responsible to our laws. If I went to Saudi or I went to Pakistan or wherever, I would be responsible to those laws. I would respect them. The same has to apply here. But we've got the most useless bunch of politicians ever, of all persuasions, really. And therein lies our fundamental problem.
When I was working for Ministry of Justice as a translator in Belgium, one day my director asked me that how do you see Muslim children growing up in Belgium? And I told them that horrible, because when they come out of school, they go home and they become Muslim. Then that wear Arabic dress and they go to madrasas. Now, for example, in the evening when I go to Ilford for shopping, I see many young children wearing Arabic dress and going to madrasas. What is this? Which kind of generation we are developing, that they are learning something else at school and then they are going to madrasa to learn something else? Do you think that these madrasas, mosque is a place of prayer? Leave it for the prayer only. Why this double education? Why this double standard then?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the fundamental problem we have, because we do have some very militant Islamists in the UK, and they've got themselves into all kinds of positions of influence. For example, I mean, the Muslim Council of Britain were very happy to call for my removal from Twitter last week. They've been curiously quiet about other matters, but they're very happy to do that. You're dead right, though. The only way that multiculturalism can work, Arif, it doesn't matter what country, it has to work on the basis that the people that come in from wherever, they have to integrate and become part of, be it Belgium, be it France, be it UK, be it wherever. That's the only basis. If you allow them to be different, and as you say, when they go home from school and they become garbed in Islamic wear, and they go to the madrasas and they're taught political things, then that should be tackled. That should be confronted, that issue. But instead, I fear that, again, we come back to the fundamental problem. Who is the politician that will confront this? Who will say this is a problem? It can't be, at the moment in the UK, at any rate, it can't be said. And so the problem gets worse. And the thing is that, Arif, as one generation moves on and then a new generation comes, the problem gets worse. It doesn't get better, because generations can see, basically, we don't have to integrate. We can live in UK. We don't have to accept UK laws. We can have Sharia law if we want. We don't have to pay attention to government, do what the government urges us to do, and they get away with it. Now, that's true. That is the fundamental issue that we have, and that's why there's not enough harmony. I think you and I would want to see a harmonious society where people get along. You can't have that if there's a section that's basically saying we're not interested in your laws and we will do whatever we want. Well, sorry, that's not going to work. And, it's particularly acute in Britain. It's funny, you've come to a country, Arif, which is rapidly Islamifying itself. And I don't know what that's going to mean, but some people say, by 2030, 2040, this country could become a majority Muslim country. Now, if that then means that we become a Sharia country, we're gone. So I hope that doesn't happen. I don't want to be too negative about it, but it's a genuine concern, and it's manifest in the fact that we let all the things that you mentioned, we let those things happen, and nobody really is allowed to talk about it. If you said that on Twitter, I think you might be banned. And if you couldn't say it in the mainstream media, you've got to sell. We talk about diversity. Well, I'm all for diversity, but I'm also for respect, and I'm for the rule of law. What's wrong with that?
David, as a Muslim, I was also taught this, and every Muslim child is taught that you are Muslim, you are superior to others. Only you are correct. Nobody else will go to paradise, only you will go to paradise. I consider, as a student of politics, I consider it as a fascism. Because fascism, when you differentiate between people on the basis of religion, and it is taught to us that you have to convert every non-Muslim because they will not go to paradise, they will rot in hell, so we have to convert them. My question is that there are so many covenants of United Nations that UK has signed, Europe has signed, even Muslim countries have signed, and it is anti-fascism covenants, all of them. Isn't this fascism? And shouldn't be there a legislation in UK parliaments to stop this teaching of superiority of your religion, and then showing that you are only correct, only you are superior? Why there is no legislation in UK to stop this preaching?
Well, maybe one of the reasons for that is you mentioned the United Nations, and I know you're very familiar with the United. But I mean, the UN has got a very significant Muslim lobby, and that lobby, I think, would not be very happy if the UK did what you've just suggested. And so, in a way, I think the United Nations is a fundamental problem. By the way, Arif, I think it's a dangerous organization, to put it mildly. It really is, and I think it basks in the glory of being for human rights. But actually, I think it's anti-human rights, because it is setting up the fascism that you talk about. And one thing about religions is that many religions sort of have this thing that they are the chosen people. So take me. So I come from a Christian background, but Christians are kind of taught to believe that really, Christianity is kind of the only way to heaven and whatnot, and that's not, I suppose it's okay to have that view, but it sure as hell, if you'll pardon the expression, doesn't make me better than any Muslim or any Jew or any Hindu or it doesn't make me better than anybody else. So any religion that imposes itself as a kind of above everything else, then that religion needs to be very closely looked at. And again, the problem is, Arif, if we try to talk about it, we can't. I mean, go to the United Nations and put forward a motion calling for Islam to disavow supremacy over other peoples. Won't happen, will it?
Agreed. Yeah. David, I have some more questions. I hope you have time.
I always have time for you, Arif.
David, many grooming gangs in UK. Unlucky that all of them are from Pakistan Muslim. And these grooming gangs are targeting young girls from Christian community, from Hindu, from Sikh.
Yeah.
How to stop it? Because I know that there are some groups are caught and they are persecuted, but then still it is going on. How would you stop it then?
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, the majority of the grooming gangs are of mainly Pakistani heritage. And that's just the way it is. And it's been going on for a long time, Arif. It's been going on for 20, 30 years, probably around that time. And the British establishment turned a blind eye. They looked the other way. And the reason they did that was because I think they were scared of being called racist. And they were happy to sacrifice young white girls to these deviants in these grooming gangs, and they covered their tracks. And only in the last few years has the issue become one that they could no longer suppress. But you know, the fundamental issue is, why do we have the problem? Well, we have the problem because there is that section in our community who think they can get away with it. And again, what we need to see is the rule of law rigorously enforced in those areas. We need to have every one of these groomers, abusers, Arif, who is caught, they need to be stuck away for life. Like, I'd put them in solitary for life. That's what I would do. I could say more, but it's on YouTube. But I would definitely do that. And we need to send a message that Britain will not tolerate these gangs. And the other thing is, it's very damaging to, I think, the Pakistani culture that this goes on. And I think some people are scared to report. They fear what might happen to them. I think there's an element of that. I'm talking about Pakistani people now who might be afraid to do that. But the other thing is, they see them getting away with it. So we've had, in this country, I guess, are tens of thousands of young girls abused in this way. And you know, I mean, about 2 years ago, I was at the House of Lords in London at an event for a charity for the victims of the young girls, the Rotherham girls, where there was 1,400 of them. And I mean, you know, these things are not given the attention and the publicity that they deserve. And in fact, actually, we're being asked to feel more sorrow towards the abusers than the abused. Well, that's wrong. So it's a big problem. It's a really big problem. And it's not made better by the fact, of course, that the community from which the abusers come is a growing community in the UK. That's a problem, you know. So Britain needs to be Britain talks much about the need after Brexit to control immigration from the European Union. And that's I understand that. And that's perfectly reasonable. But hey, maybe we need to control immigration from other parts of the world as well, so that we bring in the best people, not the worst.
David, you mentioned Rotherham. Now, this great country, United Kingdom, is so weak that we cannot sack a corrupt and Lord from Rotherham, Lord Nazir Ahmad. He has so many cases against him. He has case of harassment also, and all these things. And still we cannot remove one Lord from House of Lord. How can you change things?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It's almost like he's protected, isn't it? It's almost like somebody's looking after him. Now, we can only speculate who that might be, but I believe that there are those in high places in the British establishment who, for various reasons, don't want the likes of him to be put on trial and convicted. And that speaks to how rotten this country was. We were a great country once upon a time. I think, you know, we weren't perfect. No country's perfect, but we were a pretty significant nation that defended itself. We seem to have lost, in my lifetime actually, we've lost the desire to stand up for ourselves. That's one of the reasons, for example, that's why I admire President Trump in the States. That's why I admire Prime Minister Modi in India. I can see other nations where they're standing up and they're asserting themselves. It's so ironic that as that's happening, we're not. we're lying down as a nation where you see the ridiculous images coming from our the south coast, where there's a tsunami of third world migration coming in. Government's not interested. They're being put up in 4-star hotels. So this is we have governments that won't defend us, and then that raises the spectre: if government won't defend you, who will?
Agreed. My daughter goes to university here, so I also fear all these things.
Yeah.
To the Brexit.
Yeah.
As a French citizen, we moved to UK some 9 years ago.
Yeah.
And when Brexit thing was happening, and I had a meeting with my wife and my children, and I asked them, I said, what do you want to do? And they said that we forgot our French language also, because we are studying here. They were very young when they came here. So they said that we want to spend our lives here, and we want to work here, and we want to live here.
Yeah.
So I said, apply for British nationality. So Brexit won't affect us. But tell us something about Brexit, as yesterday I heard that a minister of Brexit has resigned and there are some complications going on. Still, we are not decided that Brexit is happening, or there are some things, something happened to ex-5 prime ministers united against Boris Johnson. What's the story?
Okay, so here's the story. Here's the story. First of all, the UK has left the European Union. We formally removed ourselves from the EU. However, we've had this 2020 is the year of transition. And the reason for that year, Arif, was to negotiate a good trade deal between European partners and us. And that's proven to be very difficult. I don't believe the European Union, or really, I'm not sure if they want a deal or not. I think they maybe want to punish us, which is suicidal on their part, but hey, that's politics. And so the thing has been that they've made getting a trade deal negotiation is probably going to run up, I reckon, until probably December, till we be certain of whether or not we're going to get one. But with Boris Johnson, who I think is very weak on many issues, funnily enough, this is one issue that he's actually reasonably strong on. So I think the British government has said to the European Union, look, you've got to the middle of October, which is not that far away. You've got to the middle of October to come up with a reasonable deal, and then we can put that in place. And I hope that happens, because, as I've said to you the last time, Arif, I look upon European citizens as my friends, and I've got loads of friends in so many EU countries. The point for me about Brexit was the UK asserting its own political sovereignty to do the right thing for British people, but working closely with our good friends, you know, in France, Spain, Germany, all those countries, great countries. As for the 5 prime ministers that you mentioned who were piling on Boris Johnson, well, you know, Boris Johnson is a majority in the Commons of 80 MPs. He's got 80 MPs more than the others. Yesterday, he got 77 of them to vote for him. So what that means is, I'm afraid, Theresa May, John Major, Tony Blair, nobody cares what you think. You're yesterday's men. And much as I criticise Boris Johnson, I also think, Arif, it's good to give credit where credit's due. And as I say, I really want us to get a deal, because if we don't get a good deal, it will be a problem for the UK, for sure. It will be a big problem for the European Union. Now, at a time of COVID, when all countries are suffering in one way or another, apart from China, that's another discussion. All countries are suffering. Surely we want to be able to trade and do well together. I want us to trade with France, Germany, Spain, Holland, Belgium, all these countries. But remember, the UK, is their biggest market. So if they don't come to a deal with us, there will be tariffs on every product coming, or many products coming from the EU to us. That disrupts the economy. That will cost jobs, make things more expensive at a time when we're all in recession one way or another. So I hope it works out well. The EU needs to show good faith. And history shows me, Arif, that what they do is the European Union waits until 1 minute before midnight, and then it does a day. So that's probably, I hope that's what's going to happen. And I look forward to coming back on and talking to you about it. If it does, and if it doesn't, we'll all have to cope with the consequences.
Coming to the present point now, this Chinese virus, this has destroyed all of us. Just today I was talking to my children because my children are very much cautious for the mask, and my daughter, she does not go out without mask and all these things, and they are very afraid. And when I talking today to my children, and I said that comparing with Europe, like France, Germany, how they have handled and how we have handled in England, do you think that we have mishandled it? Because everything is destroyed, everything.
It's been totally mishandled. And I mean, I've got friends in Holland, for example, and I mean, over in Holland, and I think Belgium as well, I mean, their response has been it's been different. So I don't think people are walking around in Amsterdam in masks, for example. And I mean, they're not falling over and dropping dead of COVID-19. The British government got it wrong back in March, I think. And what they did was, Arif, they spent many, many millions of pounds on TV, scaring people into believing that COVID-19 was going to wipe out half the population. Instead, I think the total number of deaths in the UK from COVID-19 exclusively, so people who had no other ailments, no other morbidities, it's just under 1,400 people. Well, listen, 1,400 people dying off COVID as opposed to from COVID. It's not a pandemic. And what worries me is that the UK has melted down the economy. Honestly, I'll make a prediction now, and it's an easy. I was making it 4 months ago. When we get to the end of October next month, just watch the unemployment numbers. And in particular, you mentioned your kids at uni and whatnot. Back when I was coming out of university a long time ago, Arif, there was a big economic recession in UK. And it was very hard for young people like me to get a job. This time, it's going to be worse by the time we get. And it's that age group, you know, the 18 to 25-year-old young people. So I think the government has mishandled it, and they're continuing to mishandle it. And they have scared so many people, young people, Arif, and old people. I've spoken to elderly people in their 80s who have not been out of the house in 6 months. They're too scared. They think if they go out, they'll get the virus and they'll die. Now, that's extremely unlikely to happen, but that's what they think. And the UK economy has been ruined, much more so than many European economies. And I blame Boris Johnson for this, completely blame Boris Johnson. And I feel sorry for young people that are so scared. I feel sorry for old people that are scared. I must tell you, I do not wear a mask. I will not wear a mask. I am prepared to take the risk in that. I follow government regulations, of course, and government regulations do allow for those who have various exemptions not to wear a mask. I hope we get to the day where we don't wear masks. Because here's the thing about masks that I wonder, do people feel this? You and I are talking like this to each other. I can see you, you can see me. You can see my face, I can see your face. That's the nature of our common humanity. We can see our expressions, our eyes, our mouth. You know, if you put a mask on, you can't see anything. It's horrendous. It takes away our very humanity. Regardless of religion and stuff, we have a humanity, and we need to be able to see each other. So I would encourage the government to, try to get the civil servants back to work, get the public sector, all of it back to work, encourage the private sector to get back to work, lose the masks, look after our most vulnerable, look after the people with comorbidities who are more likely, look after them. But we could have done that back in April, Arif. And we didn't. And now, when you get to the end of October and you see millions of people joining the unemployment lines, it's not COVID that did it. It's the government that's done it.
So you think that mask is not necessary?
No, I don't. There's no science behind it. There's very little scientific data that says that the wearing of a mask will in any regard either protect you or protect other people. It's just not there. It's hearsay, and there's lots of scientific evidence to suggest that. So, and actually, the other thing is, it could potentially damage you, because if you're, I see people, you must see people as well. So people wear masks, and then they take the mask off and they put it in their pocket, or if it's a lady, in their handbag, and then they put it back on, and then they take it back off. All the time, Arif, if there was any infection, it's being spread. I see people, with the masks on, and because they get very hot and bothered, they constantly touch their face. That, if there was infection, would also exacerbate it. So I'm sorry, it doesn't make sense to me, and again, we have to look at some of our neighbours in Europe, and we see much more sensible advice. I can respect. That's why, I do look upon Europe as our friends, because I can see much more sensible practices over there than here. But I'm afraid someone once said that Britain is a nation of rule takers, and this government just likes to give out rules, and sadly, too many people follow them. But,
David, there is a British man whom I almost on daily basis swear on, and I shout on him, and my wife does not like it, because whole entire family move on public transport, and public transport is handled by Mayor of London, and every time when I'm going to bus, I say, "Hey, Sadiq Khan, why are you there? You should not be there. You don't deserve to be mayor of this great city," etc., etc. My son, yesterday when I went to take him from the bus, he called me and he said that the bus was full because it has 30 children's capacity, so he did not allow me. Now, a child coming out of school tired at 3:15 and reaches at 5 o'clock at home. Now, Sadiq Khan, I think Johnson was a wonderful mayor of London. Yes. Has Sadiq Khan failed, and why there is no election this year, and do you think that he will be again mayor of London next year?
Well, I have to say I completely agree with you. Sadiq Khan is the worst thing to happen to London since arguably the Great Fire of London in 1666. This man has presided over London, which is increasingly unrecognisable. But for people who use public transport in London in particular, he's been a disaster over that. TfL is losing, I think it's about 2 billion in revenue streams. It's in a mess. Actually, a couple of weeks ago on one of my own live streams, I had a London mayoral candidate in the form of David Curtin, who's standing against Sadiq Khan. And he's a very sensible chap, and I hope people will consider David. But London needs better than Sadiq Khan. Boris Johnson did do a good job as mayor. I agree with that. But what's happening under Sadiq Khan, I'm afraid, is going to be very difficult to reverse, because here's the problem. The amount of migration coming into London is changing London, Arif, almost unrecognisably. So I fear that although I don't want him, if there was the mayoral election took place tomorrow, I think he'd probably win it quite significantly. And that breaks my heart, because I love to go to London. I love to see London as it was. But when I look at what Sadiq Khan's doing to London, I'm wondering, is it going to be even recognisable? I mean, I've called it Londonistan. It doesn't look, people, like, you would have come to London initially expecting London to be the London of the history books, of the movies. But it's not, it's parts of it aren't like that at all anymore. It's also not a very safe city. It's a city where gangs operate seemingly with impunity. And there's so many problems in London. And most of it can be traced back to Mayor Sadiq Khan, the worst mayor that London has ever had.
Coming to the last part of discussion, going to India now.
Yeah.
The Chinese virus has affected entire world, but now China attacked India in Ladakh and killed Indian soldiers there. And they say that in the buffer zone, Chinese have invaded and occupied some land of the buffer zone between India and China. There are things going on, and China is extensively using Pakistan as its stooge and provoking India. Do you see a war between China, Pakistan, and India? And do you see that India is strong enough to counter both of them?
Yeah, this is one of the things that gives me great hope. And in actual fact, Arif, on Saturday of this week, I'm speaking with Major Gaurav Arya, and we're going to be talking about China. I have every confidence that India has the military might and determination to repel the Chinese in these incursions. And in fact, actually, I don't think that China could win a war against India, despite all the bluster about it. So what we've seen in the Ladakh, I think, and the Indian response, which was necessary to repel them, has put a shot across the bow of the Chinese. But let's be clear, China is the biggest threat in this world, beyond any shadow of doubt. People talk about Russia. They don't understand. China is the problem. China's everywhere, every country, in all kinds of ways, and it's not a force for good. And the China virus has caused every economy in the world problems, Arif, apart from one, China. So that's another reason why I want Donald Trump re-elected, because he, I think, will stand with Prime Minister Modi against Chinese aggression, and we need to see that. So yeah, China's a big problem, but I think I stand with India. I do think the Indian military have shown their strength. When you get to areas like Tibet, I don't think the Chinese have got the capability of actually fighting in that rarefied atmosphere. And in fact, actually, there's a very good article which I've published on my altnewsmedia.net channel today, with I think it's 10 different reasons why China would not win against India. So I'll send you the link to that as well, so you can have a read of it. But yeah, I'm confident. But listen, China's the big problem, and another reason for all of us folks to unite and stand together. We must do that.
David, there was a territory of United Kingdom, Hong Kong, before 1997. Do you think the British, have betrayed Hong Kong, because Hong Kong has been occupied and China has abandoned all the agreements and commitments? So why Britain is not doing as much as it should do? They say we will give nationality to every Hong Kong person. Is this the solution?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm very fond of Hong Kong. I went there on my honeymoon many years ago. I've been back as well. So I think Britain has not stood by Hong Kong. It's done that because it's scared of China. That's the truth of the matter. It foolishly trusted the Chinese. Big mistake. You cannot trust the Chinese Communist Party. In the situation in which Hong Kong finds itself at the moment, if Britain did provide the best of the people living there with a passport into the UK, I mean, I wouldn't be unhappy about that, because I think some of those people will bring on, but like lots of other good people have come here, they'll bring entrepreneurial skills, they'll bring business. I would swap them for, some of the other people arriving in dinghies that we've got on our coasts. So I think we should do more for Hong Kong, and certainly my sympathies lie entirely with the people of Hong Kong, who face, honestly, well, you'll understand this, they faced a tyranny from China every bit as bad as you would have faced from the Pakistani government when you were there as well. The CCP are an implacable enemy of democracy and freedom and liberty. And so, yes, I stand, just as I stand with India, I stand with the people of Hong Kong, and I wish my government did more.
Do you see Tibet and East Turkestan Uyghur getting independence in near future? Realistically?
No, I don't. I wish they did. I think geopolitically, Tibet is too important to China to let go. So I just can't see how that would happen. But it would be a wonderful thing if it did happen. Because I think the one way to deal with the Chinese Communist Party is to break away, as we've talked about actually with Pakistan as well, to disintegrate parts of it and restore freedoms to the Tibetan people. Again, I stand with Tibet, but the Chinese won't let go. I mean, you know all the changes that's happened in Tibet. The Chinese are transforming. Just like they're doing the same thing in Hong Kong that they did in Tibet. They're flooding in their own people, displacing the if you like, the ethnic Tibetans, and that's what they're doing in Hong Kong as well. But certainly, freedom for Tibet, absolutely crucial.
Last question. Indian leaders are saying that we will soon get back our Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. Do you see this happening?
I hope so. I hope so. It's so hard to say because the problem here isn't actually India. The problem is, of course, Pakistan. That's where the problems all lie. And Pakistan, as we know, is being used at the moment by the Chinese for its own purposes. And that means that for Chinese purposes, it suits them to accommodate that particular, Kashmir area. But I would like India to take control of the entire region and restore the same human rights for the people living in Pakistan administered Kashmir as in India administered Kashmir. And what's wrong with that? Because I came into this whole discussion, a couple of years ago. I thought what was happening in Kashmir with the removal of Article 370, that was just a good thing. What's wrong with empowering people? But then it comes back to fundamental issue, which we have mentioned before, Arif. I consider Pakistan to be a failed state. It's got a rogue regime in charge. I think it needs to be disintegrated. I want to see freedoms for example, my friends in Balochistan. I mean, one of the things that saddens me about not being on Twitter anymore is I was able to, the Balochistan people would constantly send me stuff, and I did always retweet everything they ever sent me because I sympathize with them. But similarly, in the other areas that the thing that I spoke about in London a year ago, my solution to Pakistan is break it up. Its time is over, and restore freedom to the different regions and the different people. Balochistan, where there's great levels of wealth, same in Sindh as well. That's the solution to Pakistan. It needs to be broken up. It's lasted too long, and I hope that in my lifetime and yours, maybe we will see freedom for the peoples within those regions. But the state itself is a failed state. It's a terrorist enabling state as well. And now it's become a little poodle for China. So, maybe the Chinese dragon will consume it. I don't know.
Thank you very much, David. It was so wonderful, and you have been so clear in your speeches. Thank you very much, David.
Yeah, look, my absolute pleasure to speak to you, Arif. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you to everybody watching this. And as I say, I'm continuing to be around. I haven't gone anywhere. And I look forward to being back in your channel again and speaking to you. But thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much. So kind of you.